just because you don't see somebody going through pain doesn't mean they're not in pain.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I am passionate about storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. Today, I am so excited to be back with you for another show, and I am pleased to have special guests, Jeff Pearson and Catherine Pearson, on the show. Jeff was diagnosed with hydrocephalus shortly after birth and has undergone numerous surgeries with the help of his wife, Catherine, as a caregiver and advocate. Jeff and Catherine launched their nonprofit organization, Hydro with Hope, in 2022 to help others dealing with hydrocephalus, and created a journal, My Hydro Warrior Story, for other patients to use as a guide and to help them through their course with hydrocephalus. In 2023, they launched their TV show, Invisible Condition, where they share the inspiring stories of people living with invisible conditions. Jeff and Catherine then created the online community Invisible Condition University as a safe space for people coping with invisible conditions to help connect and support one another and access resources and workshops to better understand their conditions as they navigate life with an invisible condition. Thank you so much, Jeff and Catherine, for being on the show today.
No problem. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And I will warn our listeners, all three of us magically have a bit of a cold at the moment. So
Right? Well timed. Well timed. Yeah.
that's the beauty of getting into this late fall, early winter season. But, it kind of goes along with the theme of we're all dealing with things minor or major on a daily basis, and those things may be invisible. It's really important to get support and find community as you are navigating those conditions. Tell me, what was it that inspired you to start your TV show, Invisible Condition?
Yeah. So, man, we were actually at a conference promoting the nonprofit Hydro with Hope, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. Everybody anybody with a condition that they've dealt with, especially something they've dealt with their entire life. I was diagnosed with this at 2 weeks old. I've been doing this a while. And so when it's something that you're just used to, it doesn't feel extraordinary. It's like, yeah, it's life. It's daily life, carry on, whatever. But I happened to be talking to this person at this conference, and she asked about my story. And anytime you bring up brain surgery, especially multiple brain surgeries, they go, whoa, 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 what? Back up a little bit. Tell me more about that. So I told them about my story and how that all started and throughout the lifetime and everything with everything with hydrocephalus. And she said, wow, we might have to talk about that. And I knew it wasn't going to be the hydrocephalus hour because we knew that wouldn't last very long, talking about one condition all the time, every week, so we said, okay, well, how do we do this? And came up with the show title, Invisible Condition, because there's so many conditions out there that are invisible to the outside, that so many people are dealing with on a daily basis, that are very real, even though they're invisible. And the tagline for the show is, it's not all in your head, for a reason, because when it's invisible, especially when it's invisible, and you go to the doctor and they go, I can't find anything wrong. Like for me, it was pretty easy to find what was wrong. But for a lot of these conditions, it's hard. And people go through years of getting, things like that said to them by the doctors. And so it's not all in your head. It is real. You are not alone. You do have a community. You do have a voice. You are going through this. And we want to, make sure that you have a place to talk about it. So that's what the show's for.
So, Catherine, from your perspective as a loved one and at times a caregiver for someone with an invisible condition, what does this community and show mean for you to share with the world?
Yeah, it means a lot, if I state it simply. But really, when I first started watching Jeff go through surgeries, it was over 11 years ago. And we had been married about 14 years. We had 3 little kiddos at the time. I don't even remember their ages at the moment. um, but I didn't have that much community around me. I was, you know, Jeff went to the hospital in an ambulance. It was scary. It was an emergency. And I texted some friends and I said, "Hey, I'm in the hospital with Jeff. You know, this is what's going on." And the responses that I got were kind. It was like, "Oh, praying for you." Um, but there wasn't very much that was like, "Oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're going through. How can we support you? We, we'll bring you some tangible resources and some, support." There just wasn't a ton of support there. And so to have this show, and now, as you mentioned, the membership community, it has, that's what it has started to foster, is that, very real sense of community. We're not going through it alone. We're not going through it by ourselves. There is a very real, community out there that is going through very similar things, very similar emotions and stories and experiences. And, so now we can lean on each other and say, "You're not alone." Like Jeff said, you're not alone. It's not all in your head. It is very real and it's very tangible. And now there's a community with that, that offers that support.
I want to highlight for listeners who may not know fully because they haven't encountered this particular condition before, hydrocephalus, how dangerous it can be. Jeff, can you share with us how you were diagnosed, the circumstances surrounding that, and how that affected you, not only in that immediate time frame as a young child, but as you were growing up and as you were getting married, how it affected you and changed your life despite it being to the world an invisible condition?
Well, I was diagnosed at 2 weeks old. I was born, and they did all the measurements that they do when you're born, and they do the same thing at the 2 week checkup. And one of those is a head measurement around here, around the crown here, around above your eyes, and it was just different enough that they said, we better, don't worry, Mom and Dad, it's probably nothing. It's probably cool. Let's just get a CAT scan. Everything's cool. And I said, "I'm just kidding. We're going to do brain surgery instead." And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to see their response. Honestly, they're just to see, like, how do you handle something like that? But so 2 weeks old was my diagnosis originally, and then I had the brain surgery. Had another one at 6 months old, another revision they call it, but it's just another brain surgery to take out a shunt that's not working and implant one that is. And then I had one at 18, and then I had two in 2014, one in 2018, and one in 2021. And so a nice long break from 18 to 36, which is what Catherine's talking about. We got married in 99 when we were 22. And so from 22 to 36, it was a nice long, she didn't know anything about anything. It was like, "Oh, cool. Everything's cool. We'll just carry on with our life." But really growing up, I was not treated differently. I was never told. My parents never said, "Okay, teachers, listen, he's got this thing going on. So be careful." No. It was a very normal, very chill, very cool childhood. We went on trips, we went on vacations, we went snowboarding, we went skiing, we went, I did all the things. And nothing was really abnormal because all the surgeries really went well. All the way up until about 36 years old anyway. But everything was great. Of course, you adapt. If things like I had a couple eye surgeries because of side effects from the brain surgeries and stuff, and you adapt. It's kind of weird to have eye surgery and when you're in fourth grade and you got this patch over your eye and all the weird things. But I mean, generally speaking, it was pretty normal. And so I credit my parents for that, because they could have made it much weirder and much more, you should be careful and you've got this condition and you're not normal and you're sick and you got no. And so I credit a lot of that to them, for success later in life, to be able to just say, hey, it's just a normal part of life, and you launch and adjust, man. It's just another thing.
I love the empathy with which you look back on the experience, not just for yourself, but also for your parents. And also how you were mentioning how you would like to be a fly on the wall in the room when they got that diagnosis and what that would be like. And now that, you are a parent to 3 children, and I'm sure they get themselves into trouble, things happen, we have to deal with health issues and things. It's so scary as a parent.
Yeah, you want to tell him? You want to tell her about Nick? Like, we have only had one experience like that, and it was much more minor, but man, at the time.
So we did have not quite the same experience with brain surgery, but our son, who is our middle child, when he was about 4 weeks old, started throwing up in an unusual way. A lot of times, newborns will spit up, but this started to become excessive. And I, took him to see the doctor, and, they did a little ultrasound on him, and they were like, well, everything seems to be normal. Take him home, maybe try a different formula. Okay. So took him home. I think that was a Friday. On a Monday morning, trigger warning, he started throwing up blood. And I said, this is not okay. This is not normal. We got to get him back to the hospital. And it was in that moment when I have a feeling that I probably experienced a lot of similar emotions to what Jeff's parents experienced. Just that fear of, oh my goodness, there is something wrong with my child. I don't know what it is, but I really need somebody, an expert, a professional who can help me with this, to figure out what the heck is going on. So for our son, we did have our older daughter as well at the time. So what we did was Jeff took our son quickly to the emergency room. I got my daughter over to my parents' house. At the time, they did live in the same city as us. And so got her situated, and then met Jeff at the hospital with our son. And they, what they told us was that he had a condition that was called pyloric stenosis. And it was basically a blockage at the exit of the stomach, from the stomach to the intestines. And they were like, of all the things that kiddos need to have surgery for, this one is pretty basic. It's pretty, standard, kind of, it's done a bunch of times. And so, so the surgeon for us was very comforting, very reassuring, that he would be fine, that everything would be okay. But there was still, a lot of emotions around, having to watch your son go through surgery. And, poor little, our son was 4 weeks old. I know Jeff was 2 weeks when he had his surgery, but 4 weeks old. And that poor little guy, he had an IV like sticking out of his head because, with a newborn, that's the only place they could find or really, that made sense to do an IV. And it was crazy. Long story short, he's doing great now. He's fantastic. A really thriving 17, almost 18-year-old 6-foot guy. So, praise God, all's well that ends well in that situation. But it was very scary at the time when it first started. So yeah, relate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it brings up another really important thing with your children, with yourself, with your spouse, the people you love. When something's wrong, really listening to that, right? Listening to your intuition that no, something's really wrong. And you'd had a child before, you knew that they were spitty, so to speak, and they throw up, but something was different, something was wrong. And you sought care even before he was spitting up blood. You knew that this was a real problem, and listening to your intuition is so important. And I wanted to talk to you about this, Jeff, because I'm not sure if you've spoken about this on your other guest appearances, which I encourage everyone to listen to get more background and learn more about you. Something that I think is really unique about the condition you have with hydrocephalus is how there are some general symptoms that can happen, changes in vision, headaches, nausea, things like that, when hydrocephalus, when that balance is off again, despite having a shunt, for instance, like a VP shunt.
Mhm.
And when you have those symptoms, they can be mild, right? Before they get more severe. They can be different for every person. It's not unusual as a neurologist who has interacted with people who have this condition before for it to be really anxiety inducing because those symptoms aren't always caused by the shunt. And there's some concern when they come on, and there's some feeling. Sometimes I've heard it endorsed that, well, I don't know if it is, but the last time this happened, I ended up having a brain surgery, like you said. And then maybe I had these complications. It, made me miss this test in college, right? There's all of these feelings surrounding these big life disruptions. We're grateful to have the surgery and have that option and be able to fix these things. But they do cause trauma. They do cause disruptions in our lives. So then when those symptoms come back, not only you have the symptoms, but there also can be some feelings of anxiety with that.
Yeah.
Can you share for your experience or people who have reached out to you through Hydro with Hope, how those symptoms came up and what that experience was like for you as you were learning what those symptoms were for you specifically?
So yeah, the symptoms the symptoms that I can remember. I mean, I don't remember the 2 week old, and I don't remember the
Yeah.
6 month old. That's a
Yeah.
little before my conscious memory kicked in. But at 18, and I say that I'll say this first. Every symptom was similar, but they all had their little tweaks.
Mm.
They were all just a little bit different, but there was commonality between them as well. So in high school, my sophomore year of high school, I started having headaches, and I was like, headaches aren't a big deal for somebody with hydrocephalus with a shunt with brain surgery in their background. I kind of call us hydro warriors headache connoisseurs. We
Mm.
we get headaches. It's a thing. The important thing is, what's that headache mean? Does it mean you just didn't drink enough water today? Did it mean you slept funny last night and now you pulled a muscle or something and you gave you a headache? Did you not eat enough? Did you run too hard? Did you whatever? Or is that something you need to really go get checked out because it might be serious for surgery? And we kind of get sensitive to that. And so in high school, I started having headaches my sophomore year, and it got worse and worse and worse and worse for 2 years. They didn't listen for 2 years. I kept
Mm.
going back to the surgeon saying, I think I know what this is, and what it turned out to be was the tube that goes from the shunt into the abdominal cavity at the time was stuck. It was stuck. My tissue had grown. They'd put a longer tube in at 4 years old to account for the fact that I'm going to be small. Not the same size at 18 that I am when I'm 4, which is great. But they didn't account for the fact that I grew really fast, and so that tube just kind of froze in place from the tissue that just kind of adhered to it, my abdomen, and did not let it grow with me. And so about my sophomore year, we ran out of cord, and the shunt started to literally pull out and away from my head gradually for 2 straight years.
Mm.
That doesn't feel very good. That hurts a lot. Headaches are a thing. And finally, after graduating high school, they had done enough comparative CT scans, and they said, "Oh, look, he's right. Yeah, look at that. It's pulling apart from the."
Mm.
So I, that was one of them, and so that was headaches are a pretty obvious symptom for hydrocephalus, and that's been the main one I get. I know a lot of people get nausea, a lot of people get several other symptoms. My main thing is headaches. And so in 2014, when I had to have 2 back-to-back revisions within 24 hours because they found a bacterial infection in the cerebral spinal fluid, the fluid that surrounds the brain and the skull. There was a pocket of it in my abdomen that wasn't reabsorbing because there was a bacterial infection in there. And the symptoms were a little different there that pointed us to the hospital. It felt like an appendicitis, but I also had headaches there too. And so the main thing is you just got to pay attention to your symptoms and be really in tune with what your body is doing, and which people with hydrocephalus, I don't know, probably other conditions too, people that are in and out of the hospital, we get pretty sensitive to our bodies and to what we're going through and what we're feeling. And so, we know what's normal and what's not. And so I think the commonality was headaches, and that's what we responded to. Same thing with this last one. We had some headaches that developed into, it kind of moved down my head and into my shoulders, and I couldn't hardly move anything, and went to the hospital, and they poked around and sent me home, said, "I don't know what it is, but here's some pain meds." And then they said, "Well, I think we're going to have to do exploratory neurosurgery." It's never a good word to hear. That was
Right.
another one of those that goes, "Are you sure? Are you sure we should do that? Because that's pretty serious." But yeah, that's what it was. And it ended up being the correct thing to do because there was a blockage in a part of the shunt that was making it not function properly. So it needed to be replaced. But that exploratory, that word makes it sound kind of scary. Exploratory neurosurgery. So, but yeah, that's the main thing is the headaches. So I don't know if anybody out there is watching. Hydrocephalus is pretty common. There's probably some people watching that have experience with this. I don't know what your experience has been, but for me, headaches.
Yes,
So
absolutely. And I think, as someone who's been in the ER or received those phone calls from the ER, and
yeah,
I think, because it's almost like with our kids, and I think about that little baby, and it wasn't your first baby, and it would have been easy to say, "Oh, maybe it's fine, baby spit up." But the patient is the expert on their body, and if they're in the ER, it's because they're concerned, and we owe them that due diligence
yeah,
because they've experienced this before. So listening, and we have to use our judgment and our critical reasoning when we are on the side of the care team, but just make sure that you are listening and really understanding that this person is the expert on their nervous system, especially now that we've gone in and we've tweaked things and we've put things
yeah,
in there. That means the only person who's the expert on this nervous system is the person who lives in it, because it's not going to be the standard operating system,
right,
right? So we've created this situation where we need you to be acutely in tune with how you feel, and we need to be
yeah.
excellent listeners when you communicate that with us. Is that something that in your support group ends up being discussed? If it's okay to discuss that here, is that a mutual feeling amongst group members of wanting to be seen and believed, because their condition is invisible and it may be difficult to really nail down, even with modern imaging and lab tests, what's going on in the moment when their body's telling them something's really not right?
So yeah, that I'd say that's pretty common for across the board with any condition. I'm trying to remember what the saying is. I saw a meme a while ago that was talking about that, and it was something. I mean, I've said it one way. This said it really well. But I've told people a lot. I said, look, I'm very thankful for all the doctors and surgeons and stuff, but you have to understand that I don't care if you've gone to med school for the standard amount of time as a GP, or if you're a neurosurgeon, you've been in there for way longer. Your first day of real world experience is your first day that you hit the floor. Walking around in your neuro unit, and because the book knowledge you get in med school and all the examples they teach you, then you encounter somebody like me. Then you encounter somebody like that person over there or that person back there. Everybody's different, and there's no such thing as the average anything when you get to the real world. So, and I'm not saying med school isn't the real world, because I know there's a lot of stuff that happens there that I don't understand, but you get my point, though. It's, that when you get to the hospital, you start dealing with real families with real things and real complications and things that they're going through. That's when it becomes pretty real. So yeah, and I'm very thankful for all the neurosurgeons I've had. I mean, good Lord, starting from the one I had at 2 weeks old that I got to keep in touch with actually for 20 years after that, and keep in touch with letters and phone calls and stuff, and all the ones that we've had leading up to the most recent one that we have. It's just phenomenal, the help and the care and the compassion that they've all had. I've not had a neurosurgeon yet that was like, just lie down and chill out. I got this. Don't worry about it. They've all been very compassionate. So it's very cool.
To go back to your question too, yes, there are definitely people that, are seeking a diagnosis that just want to be seen and heard and, validated, really, that what they're going through is real.
Yeah.
And there have been multiple stories of people who have been given one diagnosis and not really felt like that was quite on point. And so they continue seeking, additional medical attention and come up with a different diagnosis. And then usually it's that one where they feel like, oh, yes, that's actually a lot more, on point. It's more in alignment with my whole experience, so that is definitely happened on many occasions.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so important when you're training as a physician, you're learning how to compile a list of a differential diagnoses, right? You're not saying, ding, 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 I see you and I have to know the answer, because that's not realistic. We're getting new data all the time about you. We're seeing how things evolve over time. And I think because of our culture too, and also I think some of the personality traits that go into the people who self-select for going into medical school and neurosurgical programs, like these are people who want to be right. They want to do the right thing, right? They don't want to disappoint you. They want to have the answer. And a big thing when you're early on out of training or in training and you're figuring this out is the willingness to say, we don't know yet, but we're going to do everything we can to figure it out. And in the meantime, we're going to do everything we can to help you with your symptoms until we know what we're dealing with, right? So
Yes.
that's so important to learn. And that humility there is so important. And also, I wanted to share something that you learn in training that's so important to keep in mind. When you come out of medical school, like you said, and you haven't really dealt with patients that much, you might have an expectation that people are going to check off all of these boxes when they come in. But when we talked about the symptomatology, the symptoms someone has with hydrocephalus, we made a distinct point to say, within one person's disease course, it may be a little different presentations. And amongst different patients, they may have different symptoms, different at different times, right? So when someone comes in, to not discredit that they could potentially have this disorder, this condition, because they're not checking in the boxes, because as your staff physicians or the teaching physicians you're working with when you're in residency and learning how to be a clinical physician will say, gosh, I guess they didn't read the book on that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the parenting manual when you have kids, right? Just yeah. We didn't get one either. I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah,
Why
we
are
didn't
you
read the book,
walking? You never crawled. What are you doing? Didn't
right?
you
What's
read the
going on?
book?
You went out of order. Come on, jeez.
It's important. And I love having these conversations because there aren't that many opportunities outside of that stale, stiff environment where you are receiving a diagnosis or getting instructions as to how to care for yourself, what the recommendations are from your doctor. There aren't that many opportunities for us to connect on this more human level and understand where everyone's coming from. So I love being able to have this conversation with you, and also to get feedback from your community of many people with invisible conditions and what their experience is being in the healthcare system, because the healthcare system is for them, right? It shouldn't be happening to them. It is happening for their benefit.
Right. And well, and having the benefit of speaking with so many people over the last year and a half on our show, having so many different conditions, so many different experiences, it's pretty common what you're saying. What this is, yeah, it's pretty common. They want to, the biggest thing is they just want to be listened to, and they want to be acknowledged, and and actually it's funny because I have a contrast for that. We we went to a couple of neurologists over the last few years, and one of them that was recommended by a very trusted healthcare professional that I feel like is almost my GP now. I love this guy, and he's helped me so much over the last 10, 12 years. And he's like, you know what, go to this neurologist, and if she doesn't help you, then I've got another guy that I can send you, and maybe he would be a better fit. And I went to this first one, and it was not a fit. She right away tried to prescribe me a medication that I didn't need, and all the I've never had to take a regular prescription med ever in my life for anything. By the grace of God alone, I think I have escaped all of that. And I was not about to start now, based on somebody meeting with me for a very short amount of time and probably not having all the information that she should have before she made that decision. And so I took the prescription, and, you know, and a couple weeks later said, no, thank you. And said, okay, who's the other guy? Let's go see. And he was fantastic. I saw him for the first appointment we had. I think I was there for an hour and a half, and he was just blasting me with questions. He just wanted to know everything about what was going on, and just taking notes and question. And then after months, how long was it, Catherine? It was better part of a year or several months that we saw this guy.
Several months, yeah. And I want to point out too, just really quickly, that he not only asked questions about the medical background, he also asked questions about, our philosophies. Like Jeff was just saying, like, it's our preference to go as natural as possible, as much as possible. And so, to purely be prescribed a prescription medication was not in alignment with how we like to, conduct our lives. And so for this other doctor, that Jeff's talking about, the second one, he really took that in and listened and said, oh, you prefer not to do medication. He's like, are you open to it? Or is it, totally a closed door? And we're like, well, we'd like to try other things before we try a medication. And he was very understanding and very accommodating for that preference. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, totally. 100%. Yes. Thank you for saying that. Because yeah, exactly. And we got to the end of that, 8 or 9 months, I think, that we were seeing him. And he literally he's like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. The symptoms you have, I have no idea what to do for you, but I don't want to keep charging you to come here and see me if I can't help you. I don't have an answer for you. I'm so sorry. I got nothing. I'm out. I've tapped my resources. I'm out. And I was so thankful to hear that. It was so refreshing, to hear a
Yeah.
doctor say, I don't know. I don't know what's going on, which is also kind of rare. In my experience, that's kind of a rare thing for a doctor to just say, I got no clue what's going on.
Mm.
Good luck, because they don't make any money if they don't treat you. And
Mm.
so it was really cool that he did that. So if I ever have to go back to another neurologist, he's my guy. But I really appreciated that about him. So
Yeah. It's such an important lesson. And it's funny because I'm doing a new show with a dear friend of mine, and he works in sales and has for many years.
nice.
And we were talking a bit about, the psychology behind leading someone to where they want to be, right? They want to buy something from the salesperson, and a good salesperson isn't going to trick them into buying it. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to basically remove the obstacles.
Oh,
And he was sharing some insights into doing that. And along the way, he got to the point where he said, but you know what? If you're on that journey with someone and what you have to offer is not what's in their best interest, you don't have what they need. The best thing to do is say, you know what, I don't think it's a great fit, but, I can recommend this other company, or I can recommend this other service that sounds like maybe
mm-hmm.
is more in alignment with what you're interested in. And we were talking about how, that is the person that will gain your trust, because they're not selling you on something. They're not keeping you on their patient roster just to keep you there, which frankly, I think most of the time doctors wouldn't keep you there to keep billing you. It would be more of a, because they don't have the answer, but they want to keep an eye and make sure you're okay. I think that would be the
Right.
most likely
Yeah.
reason for most people. But like you said, if something comes up in the future and you need a neurologist, he gained your trust by
Yes.
being vulnerable and honest with you. And just
Yeah.
like that conversation I had with Pat about sales. I mean, this is just a universal concept of trust
Mm,
and connection with people. When we're honest with them, we gain their trust. It's
totally.
okay to say, I don't know. And I think that's something that we need to teach medical students more
Mm,
and prepare them for that humility, because they're so penalized for not knowing the answers, right? When they're in medical school and residency, it's all
yeah.
about knowing the answers. And there aren't many opportunities for you to gain any merits for saying,
Yeah.
I don't know. Can you help me find the tools? Or I don't know, and I could do more harm moving forward than good. And so I'm
Yes.
going to just stop where I am now and take a breath, take a moment. So I think that's a really important take home lesson, and
Mm,
something we need to make sure in any field of life, and especially
yeah.
medicine, where there's so much at stake with the decisions that we're making,
Oh my
that
gosh.
we
Yeah.
make sure we take that breath, and we're willing to say, I simply don't know.
Yep. Love it.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
The honest, authentic, answer is almost always more appreciated by the patient or the client than a stab in the dark that's incorrect.
Yes.
Mm,
Yep.
yeah. Absolutely. Now, Catherine, I wanted to explore your feeling, because as Jeff mentioned, at the beginning of your marriage, for quite a long time in your relationship, you knew Jeff like Superman, nothing's wrong. I'm great. I've got this shunt. I've got this condition, but I'm fine, right? I'm snowboarding. I'm doing all the things I want to do. I'm not letting this hold me back. And then suddenly things changed. How did that affect your relationship as you started to navigate that? And also, how did you feel once he was out of the woods, so to speak, if he had a headache or if he had back pain? How did you cope with this new normal of needing to be more cognizant of his condition and alert to something could happen. I need to be ready.
Yeah, good question. The short answer is probably that it took me some time and experience. Because at first, I will be vulnerable and tell you that I was probably not as compassionate as I should have been. When he was very first struggling, I was like, well, you've never struggled with it before. You're probably fine. But that was not the right answer. And so really, that first trip that he took to the ER was really eye-opening for me. To go, this is very real, and he really does have a condition that's going to take just a little bit more thought and processing and brain energy that than I had given it before. And so, at first, the emotions were, kind of fear and probably disbelief. But as he, got home from the hospital, started recovering, I was like, okay, I see hope that, that I'm going to get my strong, capable husband back. And then unfortunately it was less than 6 months it was about 6 months later, that he ended up, you know, with some more serious symptoms that required another hospitalization. And so, as stuff seemed to happen quicker and quicker, it was disconcerting at first. And I was not sure how to handle it at first. I'll be honest to say that I was numb, I think, in the beginning. That I didn't know what emotions to have. I didn't know if I should be scared, if I should be sad, if I should be, jump into Wonder Woman phase, I was not sure. And so like I said, it kind of took some time to kind of adapt to a new normal. And as he got beyond some surgeries, there were one in particular, after he had 2 brain surgeries in 2014, and he got home from the hospital and was okay for a little while, but then developed migraines that were pretty nonstop every day for the better part of a year. And that was probably one of the most challenging times because, again, I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know, should I be compassionate? Should I be like pushing him a little harder? It was a pretty uncertain time. So I did fortunately result to compassion, like, okay, take care of yourself, like, what do you need to do? Is there anything we can do to try and mitigate these symptoms, try and mitigate the migraines? And it turned out there didn't really seem to be within our scope of, stay hydrated, eat well, rest well. That's kind of, as a layperson, that's kind of the majority of what we have in our tool belts. So one of the things that we did was go back to the surgeon and say, you were the last one to touch this. Is there anything that you could do to help deal with migraines? And the ultimate answer that he gave us was, sorry, guess you're just going to have to live with headaches. People with hydrocephalus live with headaches. So guess that's you. And Jeff was understanding about that answer, but it kind of, if I'm being honest, it made me angry. So that was my emotion for that one. I was not okay with that answer. It was befuddling to me that a medical professional could say, sorry, good luck. I have no resources. I can point you in no direction to try and find answers. And so that's when it was like, okay, that's where those Wonder Woman emotions came in. It's like, okay, well, then we need to find answers because he was okay before. Yes, he had headaches even before that surgery, but he was okay before. There's got to be something we can do to help him to get back to being more okay again. You know, what can we do to reduce these migraines? And so it was, like I said, the better part of a year that we tried a variety of different things. So, um, I'm trying to remember some of the things that didn't totally work, like cranial sacral. Um, we tried, didn't really work at all. But we really tried because the medical, Western medicine didn't really give us many answers. We really went into the alternative space and, tried chiropractic, and that actually made a nice bit of difference. Jeff describes those migraines kind of cut in half. And then what really helped was a modality that's called neurofeedback. And I think Jeff wants to jump in.
Well, it wasn't just chiropractic. This guy was so chiropractors are everywhere, but you can throw a rock in any direction in any big city and hit 3 of them. But this guy was a chiropractic neurologist. He was a chiropractor for about 20 years, and then he went back. I call him the overachiever. He went back and got his doctor of neurology. So now he's got that specialized knowledge. And so his office was 10 minutes down the road. So I said, psh. And, I knew him from way back and I didn't realize that was a thing. So I said, oh my gosh, well, let's try that. And that's what helped a lot. And can I just throw one more thing in? I'm sorry. At the beginning of your story, I almost said something, but I have to, when it's not all the caregiver's responsibility when the person is going through this and you don't know it. You're talking about being like not being compassionate and just suck it up, man. Get off the floor. What's wrong with you? Okay. When you've got brain surgery in your past, and when you've got all these surgeries in your past, the 1 to 10 scale, like how do you rate your pain? No scale of 1. That's different for us. That's different for people that have been through brain surgery, multiple brain surgeries. And so just because you don't see somebody going through pain doesn't mean they're not in pain. And so that surgery in 2013, that surgery, those 2 in 2014, it got to a point that I probably should have gone in a month before, but I didn't feel it enough until I did. And then we went in, but it almost killed me both times to go in that late. And they were like, why were you not here 2 weeks ago? Because I didn't feel bad enough. I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't feel it in my body. I just wanted to throw that out there to say that it's not all Catherine's fault that she didn't catch on that I was writhing in pain before these surgeries. I didn't show it because I didn't feel it. Like literally the day that before that 2013 surgery, I woke up that morning and it felt like I had a tummy ache, literally. And it turned out to be a bowel obstruction. My intestine was pinched off by all the scar tissue that was basically holding me together in my abdomen from all the previous surgeries. And some of that got cranky and just inflamed, which obstructed my intestine, which, makes you feel like you have a spear going through your side of your body. But I didn't feel it that bad until that evening. And then that evening I couldn't stand up straight. And so it was like, okay, let's go to the hospital. So, but she wouldn't have known. I mean, you probably thought you got a tummy ache. Oh, suck it up, man. Drink some water, eat some breakfast, and I thought the same thing too, because it wasn't that bad. But by that night, nobody was questioning me going to the hospital at that time. So, yeah.
Right. And that's why we said early on in our discussion, It can be really challenging when you're living with these chronic invisible conditions, and there's like point A and then there's point Z. And you ideally, for everyone involved, we'd know we're going to hit Z by the time we get to like C or D, right?
Right.
But that requires listening to yourself, trusting yourself, and figuring these things out. It had been a long time since you'd had this experience, and parts of the experiences were new to you, and they were
Mhm.
completely new to Catherine.
Mhm.
And I think it's also really important to say, you had young children at the time too, right?
Mhm.
And so I imagine you both had a lot of responsibilities, and you're keeping all these plates up. We're all just kind of like keeping these spinning plates up. And then something else
Yeah.
happens. And if it seems minor at first, you're kind of like, oh gosh, where, with which hand? With which
Right.
hand? Because you don't realize yet that it's an emergency, and you have to give yourself grace for
Mm.
figuring that out. And that's why I wanted to have you share your experiences. And I appreciate you doing it so vulnerably and generously, of having to transition as a couple.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because for most of us in a long-term relationship, whether it's with our spouse, our partner, or our parent, our child,
Mhm.
there are going to be times where that balance is going to shift. Just like there are times for Jeff where that balance between CSF production and CSF being cleared shifts, and all hell breaks loose.
Right.
And it can seem like it's in a moment, because you get to that critical threshold where what was working before just doesn't work anymore. And then you get the
Yeah.
symptoms, and then you have an emergency. Our relationships often have similar challenges and breaking points. And I think it's really important to show ourselves grace and to share those stories of how we navigate, because it's coming for all of us
Huh.
if
I
it
mean,
hasn't already.
and it's funny because those times of compassion. I mean, I will say yes, the last 10 or 11 years have definitely been interesting at times, um, terrifying at times. But our kids have learned so many amazingly important lessons of compassion and listening and patience.
Mm,
And you know my our youngest, she's so sweet. I mean, even in this last round of surgery and side effect and craziness afterwards in 2021, I would end up flat on the floor in the kitchen. I'm making dinner, and all of a sudden the world goes from flat to, and I'm
mm,
boom, and I'm on the floor. And she'll just walk over. She'll be like, "Hey, Dad, how's it going? We're gonna keep making dinner, but can I get you a pillow or something? Because you're not going anywhere. I see that you're not going anywhere. Can I get you a pillow?" And she'll just go grab a pillow, and I'll lay on the floor because I can't move, and I'll just lay there, and she'll be like, join us when you can, and it's just so sweet and so, so innocent and so automatic, that there's no panic, there's no, oh my gosh, what happened to Dad? None of that. It's just so the lessons they've been able to learn has been huge. And it, with with our show being a platform for this kind of stuff, it's been really fun because Catherine's been on the show a couple times, several times, with me, and also our oldest daughter Elizabeth, who at the time when we were going through all that craziness for all those several surgeries, she was about 9 or 10 when those started. In 2013, she would have been about 10.
10.
And
Yeah.
so she had conscious memory of all this craziness, going to the hospital in an ambulance and all the, and so we did a show specifically with her and mom, with Catherine, and got to talk about her experience, because that's important too. Let them tell people about your experience, because it makes it more, normalizes it, and it's not so freaky, you know. Um,
yeah.
and that helps in the future too. If anything more happens, it's like, okay, Dad, we got this. We're on it. You know. So pretty cool.
I love that you've modeled for them through them experiencing this alongside you, which you wouldn't have wished for, but
No.
that's the cards that life gave you. you're modeling for them how to meet people where they are
Mhm.
and how to sit beside them in these vulnerable and challenging times. And that is such a gift to give your children. Now, as you've been starting the show, sharing those stories, tell me more about the community that you've created, Invisible Condition University, and what your goals are with supporting and educating people through this endeavor.
Yeah, Invisible Condition University. I tell you, nothing gets created out of nothing, right? Everything has a reason behind it, and um, and this is no exception. I mean, the show, there was a reason for the nonprofit, there was a reason for the show, and you see a need and you fill it, and if you can. And Invisible Condition University is no exception. We saw a need, and that need was something. Honestly, it was more like we kind of wish we had this 10 years ago when all this started happening to me. Wish we had it 10 years ago. Every time I would have surgery, I would get once you leave the hospital, they don't call you later usually and be like, hey, what can we help you with? Hey, can we answer any questions for you? Sometimes, but if it does happen, it doesn't happen long term. Once you leave the hospital, you're out and you're kind of on your own, and so that's why we created Invisible Condition University, or we call it ICU for short. We wanted to make a place, for people and families and caregivers, community, really that would listen and that would actually care what was going on after, long term. Um, Walk with people through their condition and through the uncertainty of all the things. And we figured it would be best to do it on Zoom because it's a super easy platform. It's super familiar to people. I mean, COVID was
Post-COVID.
kind of a nightmare, but Zoom was one thing that came out of it that was kind of cool. Everybody knows how to use Zoom now, so so we meet on Zoom a couple times a month and just invite patients and their caregivers and I don't know, your sister, your brother, your aunt, your mom, whoever's helping you with your care. Come on, bring it on, and we'll talk through it. We'll collaborate with each other. Hey, what did you try? Hey, what worked for you? What worked for me? And I feel like that 10 years of experience of trying all that stuff, that some worked, some didn't, and all the amazing people that we've had on the show and all the amazing people I've talked to about being on the show, we've got so many resources that we wanted to share, and we felt like this was a really good platform to do it. So that's what we did.
Yeah, to be able to create that community, like I was mentioning near the beginning, a very real, very tangible community that's going through similar experiences, of, maybe hospitalizations, maybe surgeries, maybe a medical community that's not sure entirely what to do or how to treat. All of those things, bring those, to the community discussion and let's talk about it. Let's find solutions and answers. And, if Jeff and I maybe don't personally have the answer, maybe, maybe somebody else in the group does.
Yeah.
So it's just really, we're excited to bring together, like Jeff said, bring together these resources and the collaboration, to really create a space that's supportive and encouraging and hopeful for, helping everybody to, maybe go from migraines back to Superman, like Jeff has been able to do.
That's amazing. And I think it's such an interesting use of crowdsourcing for getting these data points that can be really hard to obtain because these are often unseen conditions, as you've said, invisible conditions. But there's not always a place to have these answers met, because you might be one person in your community that has this condition, but you may
Right.
be one of thousands that you could reach out to online if you only had a way.
Mhm.
And that is one of the challenges that we face, especially with our chronic conditions and support groups and clinics. In an ideal world, we have specialty clinics for patients with hydrocephalus, for patients with motor neuron disease, which is something that we have discussed on the show before. We had James Smith, an incredible man out in the UK, who's advocating for people like himself who have that disabling and life-ending disorder.
Mm.
And it can be really difficult, especially if you live in a remote place. And even in our academic centers now, where we're broadcasting from the United States, we have these amazing resources, but we also have a vast country, and those resources aren't necessarily going to be readily available to everyone. So I think
Right.
it's a really helpful and interesting way to bring people together and give them access to information that they would not necessarily otherwise have access to. And then they can bring it to their neurologist, to their neurosurgeon, to their primary care physician, to the person that's providing their care, and say, hey, I was in this group and I heard about this. What do you think? Because your doctors don't necessarily have access to all of these resources either. They're living in the same ecosystem you are, so to speak, with
Yeah.
regards to what your community has as well. And your GP is treating a lot of different disorders every
Mm.
time. So every opportunity you can bring something to them. This is a resource I came across. What do you think about this? More than likely they'll say, oh, that's interesting. Give that to me. I'd love to look into it. And we can circle back on this and see if it's something that we can incorporate into your care plan or something that we need to research more about. So I love what you're doing. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
appreciative that that's there for patients as a way to
Yeah.
not only have their support with each other, but learn more about what they're experiencing.
That actually, what you're talking about, that actually happened. When I went back to my neurosurgeon after, kind of recently after the most recent brain surgery, I went back. It was in October of 21, and I went back to him. I don't know, first of the year or something, after they did some follow up CT scan things and everything. And after that surgery, I had some pretty serious side effects that were wreaking havoc on life. And one of them was large motor tics, involuntary tics that would just, my whole right side of my body would just, it was brutal. It was tiring. It was painful. It was, my muscles were exhausted. Not to mention the other thing was the filter in the brain that blocks out the background noise in a crowded room so that you can concentrate on a conversation you're having with somebody. That filter was gone. I had no
Mm.
filter. And so in a room of 100 people, I was hearing 100 people at the same volume. It was really hard. And so, um, but I was able to find, as we're still searching, right? It's like, oh, well, we got rid of some stuff back there. What else can we find? And we ended up finding somebody in Oregon that did, they called it pressure point therapy, and it was for the vagus nerve, right? So the vagus nerve, just the biggest nerve in the body, goes everywhere, right? So if you can treat that nerve, it chilled out those tics like you wouldn't believe. It was
Mm.
it was fantastic. And so I went
Mm.
back right after surgery, and I looked like a mess. And I went back a few months ago, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, for another follow-up CT and to see the neurosurgeon again. And he looked at me and he goes, what happened? What did you do? Because this is not the same person that I saw 3 years ago. And I told him
Mm.
exactly what I did and where I went and how they did it and what they did. And he's like, oh, yeah, yeah, I could see how that could help. Yeah, I could see how that could help. And part of me was a little
Mm.
frustrated. I was like, why didn't you tell me about this? If you thought it would help,
Mm.
why didn't you talk to me 2 years ago? But he can't necessarily, there's restrictions there. I don't think they can just voluntarily just, oh, try this, try this. But it was cool though, because he agreed. He's like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty valuable. That sounds like that would work pretty good. So, it's baby steps. It's
Yeah.
so it was cool though. It was cool to hear him acknowledge that it would that it was valuable, and not just be like, whatever.
The beauty of working in neurology and neurosurgery is, when we talked a little bit about medical students and how black and white our thinking is, once our heads have been full of all this important information, now we go and we're using the information. But especially in neurology and neurosurgery and many other fields as well in medicine, the more you practice, the more you have to be comfortable with the gray. But it's like when you come out into practice, you don't necessarily even see it because you weren't programmed to. But with time, you become comfortable with the gray and exploring that and learning. And that's the key to education. And that's why so many of us go into neurology, because we don't have yet all of the answers. It's one of those frontiers of medicine where there is so much
Yeah.
potential for breaking through those walls, making life better for people, and learning new things. But you have to embrace that and be willing to learn. So I love what you're doing. And I'm so grateful for you both sharing the experiences that you've had navigating hydrocephalus and creating this safe and informative space for people and the people who love them as they are as they are coping with their invisible conditions and trying to be as armed the best they can to do the best and live the happiest, healthiest life. So thank you so much for everything that you guys are doing. It's amazing.
Thank you for having us. It's been a delightful conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for the opportunity to get the word out. Anybody that wants to know anything about our, the community or the TV show or anything, it'll be in the information with the show, and I'd love to meet with anybody that would want to meet, and I love talking to people about this stuff. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
My pleasure. And as you said, it will all be in the show notes. Is there a particular website or handle that you would like to direct our listeners to in the meantime, in case they're driving and they want to know where could they go to learn more about you?
So if anybody wants to learn more about the TV show, that I don't really know. There'll just be a link. That's too hard to be, but for the community, if you go to myfreegiftfromjeff.com, you can learn all you'd ever want to know about the community, about how we work and what we do and what the benefits of being part of the community is. And you can join right there. And as the website address indicates, your first month would be free. And so come check us out, try it out, see how it goes, come to a couple for the month and see how it goes. We'd love to have you, and it'd be great. So those are probably the two best ways to get in touch. And as far as getting in touch with me directly, invisible condition at e360tv.com is a great email. So other than that, it'll all be in the notes. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, both of you, Jeff and Catherine. It's been wonderful to chat with you today. And thank you so much to our listeners for being here as well. Until next time, make sure to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss our upcoming solo talks, where I help you with concepts to master your mindset, and even more inspiring guest episodes like the one we had today with Jeff and Catherine. Until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.